Hi everyone, welcome back to My Parenting Way. My name's Katie and today I'm going to give you some tips on how we cope as a family of 4 without any family nearby to help us. So we have 2 children, Aidan, who is now 19 months, and Emily, who is 5. And we don't have any family nearby. My parents are around 2.5 hours away, which isn't a huge amount of time or distance, but it's still not a pop-in kind of distance. And my husband's family live in France. So this is where we're at. So my tip number 1 is making childcare as easy as possible. So I am talking about as reliable as possible, and that means if you use a childminder where the childminder already has young children, sometimes you might find them randomly having to bail out on childcare to either look after themselves or young children, and this is something to bear in mind if you're looking for a childminder as your childcare option. And then when it comes to nurseries, if you manage to find a good one as close to your house as possible, it does make a huge difference, because the lovely ability to just get home, kick your shoes off, do the dishes, maybe have a cup of tea, and then just go over and pick up your child who is really close by, rather than having to drive out of your way to pick up your child. It makes a huge difference to your stress levels and anxiety. So the good thing with nurseries over childminders or any individual person that you're paying to look after your child if you're going back to work is that you don't have to pay them holidays, you don't have to pay them sick pay. So they are a bit more reliable. You're more likely to be able to just turn up at the door of the nursery and you're guaranteed someone to just take them off your hands. If someone goes off sick, it's fine because they got other people to replace them. And you, again, this kind of helps with your anxiety and being able to plan your weeks better if you've got young children, which makes a huge difference to your day. Also, when it comes to childcare, sometimes you might find, especially with nurseries and childminders actually, is that they're willing to help you out with babysitting as well. So at least you have more options then. So ask around. So this tip nicely rolls on to my tip number 2, which is find great reliable babysitters. So there are plenty of apps and things out there that help you find babysitters online, and that's fine. But I have used these in the past and you're not really quite sure what you're getting in regards to the person who's going to turn up to look after your child, especially if your child is a little bit nervous around new people. So the way I do it is either relying on friends or, as I previously mentioned, look at your current childcare, either the nursery or the childminder, and ask if they either provide babysitting services or if they know someone who would be able to help. Also, if you manage to find someone who lives nearby, it adds to that reliability. They're more likely to be able to do it, less likely to cancel if they've got a trek across the city to be able to babysit. So tip number 3 is something that I've had to really channel and really concentrate on thinking about quite a lot recently, and which is think of the positives of not having family nearby. So some of the positives might be that when you do finally meet family, it is protected time. You've blocked out a weekend or a week. And also you do things like you plan things, you go to zoos, you go to parks, you have walks, you go to restaurants, and all these lovely things which come when your family come to visit and you don't see them very often, and it makes that time with them almost extra special. And also, as I have already mentioned, it tends to be with a bigger block of time. And with this bigger block of time, it means that the family that you don't usually get to see actually get to spend some proper one-on-one time with your little ones. And that's really important, rather than a quick nip in, nip out, 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, where it might be always rushed. It might always be a quick handover. It might be a quick hello, goodbye, and off you go. And that sometimes isn't as nice as actually having a really nice wholesome day which you've blocked out especially to see your extended family. And guess what, if they do end up staying with you, they have the added bonus where they can actually babysit with you, and definitely ask if they will, because you need to make the most of that when they do come and visit. So leading on from tip number 3 is my tip number 4, which is don't focus on what other people have. So I have a few friends who are lucky enough, as I already mentioned, that have both sets of grandparents nearby to help them whenever they want. And it's really difficult not to become green with jealousy. And with this, don't let that knowledge start affecting how you actually end up spending time with your family. Sometimes, recently, especially because both my children have been quite demanding, I have looked at friends' situations and the fact that they have easy help when it comes to their children and family and childcare, and I then start to kind of almost resent my time with my family because I end up thinking, oh, I really wish I had what they had, and that's no way to live. Jealousy is a wasted emotion, and it's very easy to look at someone else's situation and think it's perfect, and quite often these situations look nice and rosy on the outside, and usually it adds extra complications when you actually dig in deeper and realise actually there's problems within that in itself. So when I dig deeper to some of my friends who have family nearby, quite often it then develops into a complicated relationship within their family who provide the childcare, and sometimes they end up having arguments. And also what can happen is that the family can end up dropping by whenever they want because they feel like they have a right to, and this can really agitate my friends who just want a bit of separation time. So it does swing in roundabouts. So my tip number 5 is to start asking around your friends who live in the same area as you, because what you might find is that it's actually being by themselves without family nearby is not as uncommon as you think. So we are of a generation where a lot of us have moved away for jobs, for new lives, some of us to different countries, and actually it's actually quite common for us to end up living in places far away from our sort of immediate families. So yeah, when you start asking around, you'll realise actually there's quite a few people around you who are in the same position as you. Also with COVID, I know we're coming out of it now, but with COVID, it's interesting to realise that quite a lot of people have learn how to cope without having seen their families because they're either shielding or they're vulnerable. So again, it's made us realise how we can actually spend time together alone without extended family dropping in all the time. And when you get chatting to people, you realise that that is actually the new norm. Tip number 6 is be the first to offer play dates and to look after other children for your friends. So this sounds obvious, but this tends to work better for children who are sort of school age, reception, maybe 5 or 6 years old onwards. But also it might sound like extra stress by actually adding an extra child to your house. But actually what I've found this does is that your child is actually more distracted because they suddenly have a playmate to play with who is their friend, not their brother or sister, and they can run around the house, they can play, they're having a whale old time. They think it's the best thing ever that mummy's invited their best friend to come. You get big brownie points with your children. And also what you find is that friend who you've just babysat the child for or had a bit of a play date with then has to reciprocate. So what we find is that they then take your child off your hands for a few hours. So be the first to do it and bank that in, and then set the wheels in motion, because what you find is that when you start doing it, it then just becomes a very common thing. And when it then becomes an easier thing to do, your child knows which house to go to, they know which friends they feel most comfortable with to go, you know which children that you quite like coming to your house. It then becomes a bit of a rota, and it then becomes sort of the new norm. So what happens is that you can then rely on these sort of friends of your children who then end up taking your children sort of last minute if you need to. And that's really helpful, especially if something goes on after school that you haven't kind of thought about, or work ends up being later than you think. relying on these people has been really helpful for us. So there you go, there's my video on how to cope with having your own family when you don't have any of your own support network or extended family nearby to help. Now I realise it's probably quite a big topic, so I might do almost like a mini extension video to this. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Also, please comment on how you actually cope if you're in a similar situation to me, because I would love to hear from anyone who has little tidbits on how to cope when you don't have any help. And I will see you next time.